Just about every conversation that has had to do with this Philadelphia Phillies offseason has been somehow linked to Alec Bohm. However, trade conversations regarding the All-Star third baseman seem to have quieted in recent weeks. I want to sift through what we know based on the latest reports and kind of measure up on what is the proper outlook for this Phillies team in regards to Bohm at this current state. So let's dive right into things, and I want to give a special shout out to Rachel Malanta of Just Baseball, who writes, "The Phillies won't trade Alec Bohm, nor will they keep him. The Philadelphia Phillies need to pick a lane with third baseman Alec Bohm moving forward. Is he a piece worth sticking with or simply a stopgap?" And I think this is where a lot of the conversation gets to. Thought she did an excellent job with this article and do want to make sure I pour into a decent bit of it, but kind of want to approach this from the standpoint of I think everyone knew that this was coming, that we knew there was a bit of, uncertainty, some turmoil within the organization between Alec Bohm and the Phillies specifically about this outlook. We've lived through the ups and downs. We remember the I effing hate it here moment. We remember him being benched in game 2 of the playoffs this season. There's been a lot going on, and in between all that, the dude has played pretty well on the field, which I don't think should be diminished here. And I highlight that exactly, that just this season, to talk about Bohm, that he had 15 home runs, 97 RBIs, a .332 on-base percentage in 554 at-bats, did have 155 steals there, just 86 strikeouts, 6'5", still 28 years old. There is a lot to like about him as a baseball player, but where I think the conversation gets difficult is because I don't think he's as good as what we saw from the first half of the season, and I don't think he's as bad as what we saw from the second half of the season. So where he falls on kind of this linear plane here and where he actually lands kind of dictates on how the Phillies should view them. But to get to Rachel's article, I first want to start out with this stretch here in which she writes, "Ever since the Philadelphia Phillies benched third baseman Alec Bohm for Game 2 of the National League Division Series in October, rumors that the 2024 All-Star would soon be traded have swirled. The speculation only intensified as the Phillies made it clear they were looking to shake up their roster this offseason after a third consecutive playoff elimination, leading to manager Rob Thomson attempting to quiet things down at the winter meetings. Quote, "I just wanted to secure Bohm's mind, to let him know that we're not shopping him," Thomson told NBC Sports. "He's a good player, but being a good player, you're going to get a lot of interest from other teams. Anything can happen, but we aren't out there shopping him." Not everyone was convinced by the skipper's statement, and the fact that the Phillies aren't actively, quote, shopping Bohm on the market doesn't mean they won't trade him if a suitable offer comes across their collective desks. Still, the comments made make a lot of sense when looking at the Philadelphia's version from the team beyond 2025. Now, I think it's a little bit of semantics for who's picking up the phone first and who's making that call. The bottom line is that there have been trade conversations regarding Alec Bohm. Now, we've got zero sort of reports or indications that there's been anything close to a deal officially being done. There's been far more ludicrous asking price from the Phillies organization. And hey, sometimes they say if you shoot for the moon, you'll land in the stars. So maybe that is the tactic from Dave Dombrowski. And I guess the question that we should ask there is this negotiating in bad faith, that you're just being that annoying guy in fantasy football league saying, you trade me Saquon Barkley and I'll trade you Kate Otten right now, and that's a fair deal because, you need a tight end and all those kind of things. Is Dave Dombrowski just playing that, or is he doing it from the standpoint of, I don't really want to trade Alec Bohm, and I kind of don't want to have this conversation, so I'm going to ask for something crazy and make sure you hang it up? But I don't know what the full answer to that. I lean much more towards the first bad fantasy football manager version, to which I think Dombrowski is just hoping for a random yes and that it does work out for this team. But to continue with Rachel's thoughts here, do want to dive into the next part of this article that says, quote, "I mean, the reality is we have a lot of good players," Phillies president of baseball operations Dave Dombrowski told reporters after the team's NLDS elimination in October. "I think we just have to be open-minded to exploring what's out there for us, talk to some clubs, and see what ends up happening. That process hasn't started. Sometimes you trade good players for good players. Sometimes you trade good players for good players. You're never happy unless you win the whole thing," he continued. "We didn't win the whole thing. I think we have a really good core of players, but I think we'll be open-minded to make our club better. That's really our goal." On December 9th, the Phillies signed free agent reliever Jordan Romano to a 1-year, $8.5 million contract, and 11 days later, they added outfielder Max Kepler on a 1-year, $10 million deal. The Phillies then acquired left-handed starter Jesus Luzardo and a minor league catcher Paul McIntosh in a trade with the Miami Marlins on December 22nd, sending prospects Starling Caba and Emmanuel Boyd in return. Most recently, the team signed right-hander Joe Ross to a 1-year, $4 million contract out of free agency on December 23rd. And while I don't have an issue with any of these deals individually, this isn't exactly shaking up a World Series, the contender, the way that we were sold. Now, I think Luzardo is the most exciting part of this offseason. These are all sort of the bargain bin type players that I would consider that you're hoping for a bounce back, but Luzardo is the guy I'm most optimistic on. There is a chance that Jordan Romano can recoup the ability that he'd flashed in previous seasons, but these are each guys dealing with a little bit of issue, have some wear and tear on their arms, more specifically speaking about Romano for this conversation, and Joe Ross I'm pretty excited about as well. So these are guys that I like. I don't have an issue with any of these deals individually, but I do think we've been sold a little bit of a false promise if this is all that it is. This is not this massive offseason in which we are changing the trajectory of the franchise. Now, granted, I don't think they need to go quite to those lengths, but I do think it would be a mistake if this is a closed and shut deal for what the offseason is. But to continue a little bit farther in this article here, to want to continue on, it says, quote, "The Phillies clearly want to trade him. They clearly have not been successful in their attempts so far," Rosenthal said in a December 17th appearance on Foul Territory. "I would expect he will not be on the Phillies by the start of the season. Philadelphia has been asking for a lot in return for Bohm, which explains why any and all trade discussions have been unsuccessful." On December 16th, Rosenthal reported that when the Athletics inquired about him, the Phillies asked for all-star reliever Mason Miller, which stopped the conversation in its tracks. While you have to admire the Phillies' ambition, it's hard to imagine the front office would genuinely think Bohm would have an equivalent trade value to Miller when he very obviously does not. But that's the point. The Phillies have no interest in moving Bohm this winter unless they're getting an obnoxious overpay in return. And this is sort of the conversation that I think just does nobody any good. Nobody likes, if you're another team, to pick up the phone and just not having, eye-to-eye conversations. Now, granted, I don't think, and the more that I've sat there and processed this, I don't think the trade offer is as egregious as I initially, kind of my reaction was. I was right there with everyone's reactions on Twitter when first seeing that of this is absurd. I can't believe Dombrowski is making these kind of offers. But when you do sit there and think about it, and the value of a reliever versus the value of an all-star third baseman, there's certainly a strong case about third baseman being a much more highly important position and harder to find than a guy who isn't going to be there from an everyday standpoint. And I guess once again, the hard conversation when particularly getting to Alec Bohm is, what is the real version of Alec Bohm? Was it the guy we saw in the first half of the year that was starting in the All-Star game, participating in the home run derby, leading the MLB in RBIs for stretches of the season, or was it the guy who couldn't hit anything the entire second half of the year? That's what makes this conversation particularly difficult. But to continue on to a little bit deeper into this article before we wrap up here, I'm going to start off with this part that says the Phillies won't trade Alec Bohm yet. Unless a team offers a borderline ridiculous overpay for Bohm this offseason, the third baseman isn't going anywhere for now. The Phillies are delaying the inevitable, using Bohm as a bridge until they have a better option to take his place. Next offseason, or as soon as Aiden Miller is ready to debut in the majors, Bohm is as good as gone. Miller, just baseball's number 2 prospect in the Phillies system, was promoted to promoted from single A to high A to double A this season, making it the second top level to the minors within 14 months of being drafted out of high school. In 2024, across the 3 leagues, he posted a 261, 366, and 446 slash line in 462 plate appearances with 11 home runs, 60 RBIs, and 23 stolen bases. Although he was drafted as a shortstop, Miller has started transitioning to playing third base, where scouts believe he will stay and continue developing. At the Phillies' end-of-season press conference in October, Dombrowski said he didn't anticipate Miller making it to the big leagues in 2025, but the 20-year-old is clearly on his way up. The team has been clear that they see the star as the future of the organization, and considering he's been on national radar since middle school, it's hardly surprising. So I like Aiden Miller. I don't want to be an anti-Aiden Miller guy by any means, but what I do want to put on record here is I think it's a bit of ambitious to believe that this guy from year one, stepping into the majors as this 20-year-old kid that he currently is, I think he might even be younger than that, can be a guy that's contributing to a World Series contender. I just think that's a little ambitious to hope. Now, granted, there are certainly some special baseball players who have it in there and are able to make a day one impact, but I think that's far from the norm there. I mean, Alec Bohm himself, who's considered one of the younger players in the league, is 28 years old and had to work his way up through the minors. It does not happen overnight for guys, and I think that Miller might be put on a little bit faster track than we expected. Now, granted, we've seen guys have success. I mean, Bryce Harper, let alone look at him as a guy who was well on the national media radar from the entire time since he was in high school and before. I'm not ready to put that kind of crown on Aiden Miller. And I do think it's a little bit premature to just believe that that is going to be the case. Now, granted, I'm not going to act like I've seen every single game that Aiden Miller has played. Have checked in and watched a little bit of him down in a little bit of minor league ball with him, but not a guy that I've actively kept up with. Stuck with to the Phillies and the guys in the major leagues to this point for now. But what I guess I would just point back to is I think you can do both here. That take a look at the third basemen that are free agents. Alex Bregman, and I understand he's seeking a little bit more of a long-term deal. What if there is a world where he can't get that from anywhere, and all of a sudden we're talking a 1+1 deal or something like that? Josh Rojas, Joni Berti, JD Davis. These are guys, Gio Urshela, although he did sign with the Athletics. That would have been a nice, I like his game a lot. These are all guys that I could see bringing something to this Phillies team. But the only way this works is if you can reach that Bohm deal. I think that's really what had happened here. Is I think there would be a full search for a third baseman if that Bohm trade did happen. But we're sitting here a little, almost into January to this point, and there still has been no traction on this. But my biggest concern in the back of my head with all this is Alec Bohm isn't stupid, man. Alec Bohm doesn't live under a rock. That he sees all these same reports that we do, these same concerns of him being shopped. And I do wonder what the version of him that shows up to spring training and is ready to play for this Phillies team. I would hope that professionalism wins out and he's able to carry on his activities as one would expect. But I also think part of this entire equation and the frustrations with Bohm is he hasn't been a guy that has carried himself with the necessary professionalism from a day-to-day standpoint or the way that he goes about his business. So I think there is an aspect of this could be a little bit more of a ticking time bomb than we like to acknowledge. But for now, until the Phillies can get maximum value on that trade, I think that Dave Dombrowski is going to keep those cards close to the vest right now. But for the time being, there has to be more for this Phillies offseason. I personally am unwilling to accept that this was enough this offseason just yet. Still have my questions about the outfield. I can't believe we're going to run it back with another platoon with Brandon Marsh and Johan Rojas as the center fielders. I just can't wrap my brain around that being good enough if that is how the Phillies view things. So I do hope that there is a trade that goes down that makes all of this make a whole lot more sense. But for the time being, we continue to sit in Alec Bohm limbo. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Where are you at on the Alec Bohm conversation? Because I do think there is a wide range of opinions on the overall topic. So drop those thoughts below. As always, appreciate each and every one of you guys tuning into this video here. Make sure you're smashing that subscribe button if you have not already. Drop a like on this video. And I'll be back talking with you next time right here on Phillies Digest. Peace.